So you blew your motor. Worst day ever. A few days go by. It's time to face the facts and deal with the issue. So what are your options? Put a used motor in, which you find a used one for anywhere from 4 to 7, 8,000. And then the labor would be a minimum of 1,700 or so. Or you could just sell the chassis. Or your other option is to rebuild the motor. And that's what we're going to go over today. So how much does a motor rebuild going to cost you? This applies to both the Cayman and the 911 because all the parts are fairly close to being the same. There's only a few differences when you get into what parts are actually in the motor, like maybe the crank is slightly different and the pistons, etc. But all the costs, the labor, everything is about the same, so it could apply to both. This is mainly for your 996, 997, or 987 Boxster Cayman variants. I made this tier list to go over all the parts that go into the motor, what you can reuse, what it's going to cost you, and then also we're going to break it down into 3 levels of the motor rebuild. Just a stock one, which would just be like a factory rebuilt, and then a slightly upgraded one, which are upgrades that I would recommend for reliability, and then a crazy built motor like the one I put in my car, which is more built for as maximum amount of power and track use. So let's get into it. So here we have the tier list system. I broke down all the parts that are going into this motor. That way we could go over each part and what you could expect to pay. So prices may vary at this time. It's 2023. It might change in a few years as parts become less available. And it's all about supply and demand, or labor rates can go up. It just depends. So on the very top, we just put mandatory costs. These are things you can't really avoid, which would be like the labor and the pulling the motor in and out, or reinstalling it. So we'll start with that. It would be for Tito at Artwork to rebuild my motor. We'll just use this mechanic symbol as a mandatory thing. That costs about $4,000 for the labor. That's just rebuilding the engine. You might be able to find some independent shops that do it for cheaper, and then some for a lot more. But his is pretty fairly priced, so $4,000 is pretty good given his experience. The other cost you're looking at is removal and replace. We'll move that into the mandatory. That I was charged by Artwork $1,700. Some shops might do it for a little cheaper, some a little more expensive, but that's somewhere in the middle, I would say. Let's just start with how much it would cost you to build a stock motor. We'll start with the pistons and then we'll work our way down. You could probably reuse them if they're not affected by bore scoring. If, let's say, you are rebuilding the motor because you have bore scoring, you could replace just 1 or 2 or whatever it might be. But then at that point, the price goes up. You might end up just buying a whole new set. So you either buy a whole new set of OE ones, or let's just say you get lucky and you could reuse yours. And then the rods, same thing. You don't have to upgrade those. You could get by with reusing your stock ones if they're in good condition, they're in spec, and since our cars aren't really turboed for most of us, little kitty, having like forged rods is kind of just a plus, but for a normal NA car, stock power, it isn't really going to affect too much. Gasket set, pretty much no way around this. I think I found mine for around $600, so you could expect to pay around there. The block machining, whether you're machining for just a stock engine rebuild or you're going to bore it out to a 3.8, the difference would be either $2,900 for stock, or you could opt for the 3.8 with the steel sleeves, and then that would cost you an additional $250. So it'd be $3,150. So if you're just going stock, we're just gonna put that as a mandatory. The head, you have to have the head machined no matter what. That way it'll like meet flat with the engine. It's pretty much like you're decking the head to make sure you don't have like leaks in the future with your head gasket. Always a good idea. The cost on that's about $700. Crankshaft, if you're lucky, it'll be in good condition. You don't have to buy a new one, but if you do need a new one, the cost will go up a lot higher from there. I think as of right now, finding a used one's going to cost you anywhere from $2,500 to $4,000, and if you need a brand new one from Porsche, it's going to be about $5,000. So that one you could reuse, hopefully. If head studs are right here. Pretty much I've looked this up. The price of head studs between OEM or stock is a very small difference. We're talking like $100. If you wanted to go OE or stock, crank mains, this one, pretty much you don't have a choice. You're gonna go with the upgraded one because they're only $120. And then these things you kind of have to replace because once you install them, you don't want to reuse them. They like stretch out and stuff. And then the other thing would be the rod bearings. The cost on those are, the rod bearings are pretty cheap. The OEM ones, all brand new ones, would be like $100. Main bearings, you're looking at around $400 for brand new ones. Another cost you can't really get around, you can't reuse it, would be the timing chain and all the guides and stuff. You're going to have to replace that. That's going to run you anywhere from $900 to $1,100. So if you're shopping online, a good way to save money is you get all the part numbers for the timing chain kit. And if you piece it all together, you can get the timing chain kit and all the guides for around $800 or $900. So that's what I did to save some money. Water pump, you don't have to get a new one, but if the motor's apart, it's probably a good idea. It's not the end of the world if you have to replace it later. So if you had to, you could reuse it. We could put that under reuse. IMS bearing. IMS bearing. Where would we put this? Upgraded, OE or stock? You definitely wouldn't want to reuse it because if you know IMS bearings can fail. It's just lower in Caymans. But if you have 911, you're definitely going to want to upgrade it. They have LN Engineering has a stock upgrade that is around, I believe it's around $1,100. So if you wanted to use an OE or stock one and just, that's going to be like $300. But if you wanted like an upgraded one, it's going to be around $1,100. And then they have the super upgraded one, which has like an oil line feeding it. So it's like really well lubricated, so you never have to worry about it. But I mean, the upgraded one might be a good idea too if you're a Cayman guy. I don't know about 911s, but you're going to have to replace the IMS bearing. Next up, WPC Treatment. We're going to leave this off because that's not mandatory. You don't need that. That's billet timing chain guide. We're going to leave that off. ECU Tuning. If you have a stock build, you probably won't need that either. AOS, you won't need that. Coolant pipe. This coolant pipe is on a part of the motor that's pretty hard to get to, or it's a pain if you have to do it with a motor out in the car. It's always a good idea to replace. You could reuse it if you're saving money. It's only $130. So we could just leave that as reuse for now if you're just trying to save money. Gasket, head gasket comes with the gasket set. If you're just doing stock, you're not doing the 3.8. This is the chromoly hex drive. Also not necessary, but always a good idea. So this is like the bare minimum. If you just wanted to get your car back on the road, have a pretty fresh motor, not super brand new, but you're looking at around this much, which would bring your total to about $12,000. But ideally, you're probably going to want new pistons. You're going to want to do a few of these other upgrades. So what I would do is, if you don't want to go as crazy, is definitely just opt for the ARP head studs. They're only like $100 more than the factory ones. You're looking at around $450 or $500 for those. IMS bearing, I would go with the upgraded one. So you don't have to do the one with the oil line. That one's like $1,500 or something, and you never have to worry about it. But then the upgrade is always a good option too. This is for people that are like, you drive the car hard, you might do a few track days a year, you want something slightly more reliable because blowing the motor is the worst thing ever. So this is what things I would upgrade if you have a little bit more room in your budget. So LN Engineering sells racing rod and main bearings. They basically come coated, so it has like a dry film lubricant. You could opt for that. I would definitely do that because then you get an added layer of protection if you ever run dry or have oil starvation. What I did was I went with the WPC treatment, which I would recommend because That is a shot peening process, and that will help with lubrication as well as also harden the surface of whatever part you're having WPC treated. So I did both the main and the rod bearings and my piston rings and the piston pins. I got all that done for like $250. So I would recommend that upgrade. It would save you a lot of money and make the parts a little more reliable. What else? And then there's the billet timing chain guide. If you don't drive the car too hard, you might not need that. So we could leave that off too. ECU Tune, you don't need that if you want a slightly upgraded motor. I would definitely go with the new water pump. So let's move that up to OE stock. So that's going to add about $300 to your bill. And then the chromoly hex drive, oil hex drive. This is only $50. So we're going to throw this on into upgraded because you should upgrade that. The crankshaft, you don't really have to do the 360 journal that I did for this kind of build. So we're going to leave that off. Definitely, this is a 997S oil cooler. I would recommend upgrading to this if you don't have one, especially for a Cayman guy. It's only about $180, so just add it to the bill. It'll do you good later because it just adds more cooling and more oil capacity. The AOS, not totally necessary, but if you plan on tracking a little bit, it'd probably be a good idea. So we could add that to upgraded. The baffle oil pan. If you go with the super deep 2-quart sump system, that's going to run you about $900. FED does make one that's only 3/4 quart deep, so a little less deep, but it'll add still more reliability if you are slightly more of an enthusiast. Probably not if you're tracking the car like really heavily with slicks or close to slicks. If you just like on street tires and you want to take the car to the track and you want added reliability, you're going to want to go with, let's say, the FED one. That'll add $500 to your bill. There's a coating you could do to the pistons that will add basically I always screw this up, molybdenum to the side skirt of the piston. That will help with bore scoring, common issue for these cars. It's always a good idea. That process is only like $260 or something, or $350 from MB Performance Coatings in Santa Ana. So that would be worth it to add to the pistons. It's just added a little extra security. So the total for this upgraded motor, you're looking at around $16,000. Not bad. It's a few more grand, but you get an extra level of security and peace of mind. Let's look at if you wanted to build a crazy race motor with a 3.8 and high compression. So now, the cost of a crazy motor build. Let's clear the list and then start over from the top. And then we could see exactly how much I spent and what you guys can expect. Okay, so those costs pretty much stay the same. We're going with the 3.8 now, upgraded, which means we could start with the pistons. We had to go bigger pistons. We also went higher compression pistons. So these are custom pistons that they don't normally make. And then we had them ceramic coated and molybdenum coated. The cost on that was about $1,750 for the pistons, and then the coating was $350. For the rods, we went with K1 forged rods. These are from LN Engineering. The cost on them, when I got them at the time, was about $1,200. I have seen them for as low as $900. So I think it just depends on when you're shopping and how lucky you are as far as their inventory goes. So to go to the 3.8, we actually had to add $250 to the machining process for the block. I forgot to mention that. We also machined the head to be ported. We also did a 5-angle valve job, and then the cost on that was $2,500. Main bearings and rod bearings, we went with the OE stock ones, which were $400 and $100, but we had everything WPC treated, which cost about $250, and then that's for extra liability. ARP head studs for sure. It was only $500 for extra security. Crank mains from ARP are only $120. We had to do that. So the difference with my motor is I went with the IMS retrofit with the direct oil feed because I do not want to worry about this ever. So I went for the top tier IMS solution basically. And then other parts that my motor used are the LN Engineering billet timing chain, just another part that could fail, and I didn't want it to be a risk factor, so $250 there. The coolant pipe, we just bought an OE one. I don't want to have to go back in there and replace that one. It's only $130. Timing chain kit, I just went with the OE stock one. I shopped around for the parts, and I spent about $900 there. The crank, I did the 360 journals. So I had the crank machine to have that groove for oil to pass through for the main bearings. That's going to run you $1,000. But do the head gasket, that's going to run you about $350. The bigger head gasket accommodates the bigger pistons. Water pump, I went with the OE one, a new one. That ran me about $300. And now for some of these extra added track reliability mods. I already had the Motorsport AOS from a 996, so I guess I could put that under reuse. But if you wanted to build a motor similar to mine, you're gonna have to buy a new one, and then that's gonna cost you about $750. So we'll just put that on the list. I went with the 2-quart deep sump baffle oil pan from Engineering, and that 997S oil cooler. Definitely would recommend upgrading that. It's only, $200. We'll just add that to the list. The Chromoly oil hex drive, I did that one. It's another $50. And then ECU tuning is the last thing. So definitely, I'm gonna have HD tuning do the tune on this car. I just want, after spending all this money and then changing the compression, changing the displacement, all these parts, I want everything to be cohesive and to run properly. Like the stock computer could figure it out, and you could run a 3.8 on the stock computer, but I want it to be optimized, and I want it to be specific for my car, and I want to maximize the full potential of my car. So we're going to have to do the ECU tuning. We're going to do that soon, and that's going to cost me $1,500. So total cost for a fully built, upgraded motor, 987 Cayman. 997 is probably the same or very close to it. We're looking at around $24,000, and that's everything said and done. Labor, everything. That's what you could expect to spend if you wanted, a car that's built purposely mainly for the track and to be reliable, so we don't have to go through all this again and deal with another blown motor. You could put a used motor, but what if the person treated bad? 6 months down the line, it blows up. Now you're out another $10,000 and you still have a stock motor. So I just thought, I tracked the car. I don't plan on selling the car. I'll just go all out, man. And then it was just a slippery slope. I just upgraded one thing and it's like, this could fail. You should upgrade this. And it just kept growing and growing to now where it is I have a $25,000 motor. So this is what you guys could expect. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe, comment down below, and thanks for watching.